Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. How would you feel if the man you tried to make jealous handed you divorce papers at the family dinner table, surrounded by everyone who once thought you were the perfect couple? What if, after months of playing games, you realized the only person fooled was yourself, and now your husband is with your own sister? I thought I was so clever, sitting there on our beige sectional sofa with my phone tilted just enough for Calvin to see the screen. The Tinder notifications kept pinging, each little sound designed to get his attention. He was hunched over his laptop again, typing away at some IT project that apparently couldn't wait until Monday morning. "Ooh, this one's cute," I said loudly, swiping right on some guy with abs. Says he's a marketing manager, probably makes more than some people I know. Calvin didn't even look up. His fingers kept clicking across the keyboard, the blue light from his screen reflecting off his wire-rimmed glasses. After 8 years of marriage, he'd gotten so predictable, so boring. When was the last time he'd surprised me with flowers or planned a romantic dinner? I couldn't remember. "Mommy, why are you always on your phone?" 7-year-old Toby appeared in the doorway wearing his Batman pajamas, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Just checking messages, sweetie. Go brush your teeth." "But I want to watch cartoons with Daddy." Calvin finally glanced up, his brown eyes tired behind his glasses. "After teeth brushing, buddy. House rules." I rolled my eyes. Always the responsible one, always the rule maker. Where was the spontaneous man I'd married? The one who used to leave little love notes in my purse? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message from someone named Liam Drexel. His profile showed sandy blonde hair and a confident smile that made my stomach flutter in a way Calvin hadn't managed in months. "Hey, gorgeous. Saw we matched. Want to grab coffee sometime? I promise I'm more interesting than my corporate headshot suggests." I couldn't help but smirk. Finally, someone who knew how to flirt. I glanced at Calvin, still absorbed in his work, completely oblivious to what was happening 3 feet away from him. "Everything okay over there?" Calvin's mother Maggie asked from the kitchen doorway. She'd been staying with us for the weekend, and I could feel her sharp grey eyes taking in every detail. The woman had always been suspicious of me, like she thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. "Just fine," I replied sweetly, making sure to keep my phone screen visible as I typed back to Liam. "Just chatting with some friends." Maggie's frown deepened, but she didn't say anything. She'd learned over the years that Calvin wouldn't tolerate criticism of me, even from his own mother. At least, that's what I'd always assumed. "Calvin, honey," I called out, making my voice extra sugary. "This guy says he makes 6 figures and drives a BMW. Isn't that interesting?" Finally, Calvin looked at me, but instead of jealousy or concern, I saw something else in his expression. Disappointment, resignation. It wasn't the reaction I was hoping for. "That's nice, Evadne," he said quietly, then returned to his laptop. "That's nice?" That's all he had to say. I felt my cheeks flush with irritation. Here I was, practically throwing it in his face that other men found me attractive, and he couldn't even be bothered to care. "Maybe I should meet him," I continued, my voice getting sharper. "You know, just to see what's out there. A girl has to keep her options open." This time Calvin did look at me, really look at me. For a moment, I thought I'd finally gotten through to him. But then he just closed his laptop and stood up. "I'm going to tuck Toby in," he said. "Don't wait up." As he walked past me, I caught a whiff of his cologne, the same one he'd worn since college. Familiar, safe, boring. I looked down at my phone, where Liam had sent another message. "So what do you say? Tomorrow at that new cafe on 5th Street. I have a feeling we'd have amazing chemistry." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was just harmless flirting, right? Just a way to remind Calvin what he had, to make him appreciate me again. What could go wrong? "Sure," I typed back, looking forward to it. The message sent with a little whoosh sound, and I felt a thrill of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow I'd meet Liam, have an innocent coffee, maybe flirt a little. Calvin would realize what he was about to lose, and everything would go back to normal. Except better. He'd be attentive again, romantic again. He'd remember why he fell in love with me in the first place. From upstairs, I could hear Calvin reading Toby a bedtime story, his voice gentle and patient. The same voice that used to whisper sweet things in my ear, back when we were young and everything felt possible. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Liam, this one with a photo of him at what looked like an expensive restaurant, wine glass raised to the camera. This could be us tomorrow night if coffee goes well. I screenshot the photo before I could stop myself. Evidence of my desirability, proof that I still had it. Maybe I'd accidentally leave it where Calvin could see it. The house grew quiet as Calvin finished the bedtime routine. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow and measured. When he appeared in the living room, he looked older somehow, worn down by the day. Long day? I asked, suddenly feeling guilty for reasons I couldn't name. Yeah, he said, settling into his recliner instead of joining me on the couch. The Morrison account is giving us trouble. Might have to work this weekend. Again? The complaint slipped out before I could stop it. We never do anything fun anymore, Calvin. When was the last time you took me out to dinner? Or surprised me with something romantic? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. When was the last time you wanted me to? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I opened my mouth to respond, to list all the times I'd hinted or suggested or outright asked for more attention, but the words wouldn't come. Because if I was honest, really honest, I couldn't remember the last time I'd been excited to see him walk through the door. Couldn't remember the last time I'd initiated a conversation that wasn't a complaint or a request for him to do something. That's not fair, I said finally, isn't it? He picked up the remote and turned on the late news, effectively ending our conversation. I stared at his profile in the flickering light of the television, this man I'd promised to love for better or worse. When had we become strangers living in the same house? When had I started looking at my phone more than I looked at him? My phone buzzed again. Liam, sending another flirty message that made me smile despite myself. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I'd have coffee with someone who actually seemed interested in talking to me. Someone who made me feel attractive and wanted and alive. It was just coffee. Just harmless fun. What Calvin didn't know wouldn't hurt him. The cafe on 5th Street buzzed with the lunch crowd as I checked my reflection in my phone's camera one more time. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a blue wrap dress that Calvin had complimented once, back when he noticed such things. My auburn hair fell in loose waves around my shoulders, and I'd applied just enough makeup to look effortless. Liam was already waiting at a corner table, and he looked even better in person than in his photos. He stood when he saw me, flashing that confident smile that had caught my attention online. Evadne? Wow, you're even more beautiful than your pictures. He pulled out my chair like a proper gentleman, something Calvin hadn't done in years. Thank you, I said, feeling a flush of pleasure at the compliment. You clean up pretty well yourself. He laughed, a warm sound that made my stomach flutter. So tell me about yourself. What does a gorgeous woman like you do when she's not breaking hearts on dating apps? I felt a momentary pang of guilt. Should I mention that I was married? But then I remembered Calvin's indifference last night, his refusal to even acknowledge that other men found me attractive. I'm an office administrator at Henderson & Associates, I said instead. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Hey, steady work is nothing to apologize for. I just started as marketing manager at Pinnacle Solutions, still figuring out the corporate culture, but the money's good and the work is interesting. We fell into easy conversation, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Liam was charming and attentive, asking questions about my interests, my dreams, my thoughts on everything from movies to travel destinations. I've always wanted to go to Italy, I confessed over my second latte. See the art, taste real Italian food, maybe take a cooking class in Tuscany. That sounds amazing. Life's too short not to chase those dreams, you know? What's stopping you? What was stopping me? Calvin's practical nature, his insistence on saving for Toby's college fund, his fear of taking risks or spending money on anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Just circumstances, I said vaguely. Liam reached across the table and touched my hand gently. Sometimes we have to create our own circumstances. The contact sent electricity up my arm. When was the last time Calvin had touched me like that? When was the last time anyone had looked at me the way Liam was looking at me right now? I should probably get back to work, I said reluctantly, glancing at my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Calvin. Of course, but I hope we can do this again soon. Maybe dinner next time. Dinner. That felt like crossing a line, but the word yes was already on my lips when my phone rang again. Sorry, I should take this, I answered without looking at the caller ID. Hello? Evadne? Where are you? I've been calling for an hour. Calvin's voice was tight with worry. I'm at lunch, obviously. What's wrong? Toby's school called. He's sick and needs to be picked up. I'm stuck in a client meeting and can't leave. Guilt crashed over me like a cold wave. My son needed me, and here I was flirting with another man while my husband scrambled to handle everything. I'll be right there, I said, already gathering my purse. Everything okay? Liam asked as I stood. Family emergency, I have to go. He stood too, placing a gentle hand on my arm. I hope everything's all right. Text me later. I nodded, already halfway to the door, but as I hurried to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around and scanned the cafe windows, but saw nothing unusual. The drive to Toby's school was a blur of guilt and confusion. My son had a fever of 101 degrees and looked miserable as the nurse helped him into my car. Where were you, Mummy? He asked weakly as I buckled his seatbelt. Daddy sounded worried on the phone. Just at work, sweetheart. Let's get you home and comfortable. But as I drove, I kept thinking about Liam's smile, the way he'd listened to me like every word mattered, the way he'd made me feel interesting and desirable and alive. My phone buzzed with a text message, probably Calvin checking on Toby, but when I glanced at it at the next red light, it was from Liam. Hope everything's okay with your family. Can't stop thinking about our conversation. You're fascinating, Evadne. Can't wait to see you again. I should have deleted the message, should have blocked his number and pretended this afternoon never happened. Instead, I saved it. That evening, after Toby was settled with soup and cartoons, I sat at my kitchen table across from my sister Isabel. She'd come over to help with dinner, as she often did when Calvin was working late. You seem different tonight, Isabel observed, stirring the pot of chicken soup. Happier, maybe? Isabel was 3 years younger than me, but had always been the responsible one. She taught 3rd grade and lived alone in a tidy apartment with her 2 cats. Sometimes I wondered if she was lonely, but she never complained. Just had a good day, I guess. That's nice to hear. You've seemed, I don't know, restless lately, like something's been bothering you. I looked at my sister's concerned face and felt an overwhelming urge to confess everything, to tell her about the dating app, about Liam, about how invisible I felt in my own marriage. Can I ask you something? I said instead. Do you think Calvin and I are happy? Isabel paused in her stirring. That's a complicated question. Are you happy? I don't know anymore. He's so distant, so focused on work and Toby. I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm just the woman who does his laundry and makes his dinner. Have you talked to him about it? I've tried, but he just shuts down. He doesn't want to hear about my feelings or my needs. He's perfectly content with our boring routine. Isabel sat down across from me, her brown eyes serious. Marriage is hard, Evadne, especially with a young child. Maybe you both just need to make more effort. I'm tired of being the only one making effort, I snapped, then immediately felt bad for taking my frustration out on her. Sorry, I'm just frustrated. It's okay, but promise me you won't do anything rash. Calvin's a good man, and Toby needs both his parents. I nodded, but my phone buzzed again with another message from Liam, and I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. Later that night, after Isabel had gone home and Toby was asleep, Calvin finally returned from his client meeting. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, and his hair messed from running his hands through it. "How's Toby?" he asked, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Better. His fever broke around 6. "Good. Thank you for picking him up. I know you had to leave work." I almost corrected him, almost admitted that I'd been at the cafe with another man, but something held me back. "It's fine. That's what parents do." He nodded and headed toward the stairs. "I'm going to check on him, then get some sleep. Long day tomorrow." "Calvin, wait." He turned, and for a moment I saw something hopeful in his expression. Like he was waiting for me to say something important, something that might bridge the growing distance between us. "Never mind," I said. "Good night." The hope faded from his eyes. "Good night, Evadne." As his footsteps receded up the stairs, I pulled out my phone and read Liam's messages again. 3 more had arrived since dinner, each one more flirtatious than the last. I started typing a response, then stopped, then started again. Finally, I sent, "Thanks for a wonderful afternoon. I'd love to do it again soon." The reply came almost instantly. "How about tomorrow? I know a great little place for dinner." My finger hovered over the keyboard. This was my chance to end it, to go back to my safe, predictable life with Calvin. Instead, I typed, "It's a date." Sunday dinner at my mother's house had been a tradition for as long as I could remember. The whole family gathered around her antique oak table. Me and Calvin, Toby, my sister Isabel, and our mother Helen. It should have been a peaceful family time, but tonight I felt like I was sitting on a powder keg. Calvin had been quiet all day, even more withdrawn than usual. He'd spent the morning working in his home office while I got ready for my second date with Liam, which I'd told him was a work meeting. The lie had rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me. "Evadne, you look lovely tonight," Mum said as she passed the mashed potatoes. "That dress is very flattering." It was the same blue dress I'd worn to meet Liam yesterday, and I'd chosen it deliberately. I wanted to feel attractive, confident, in control. "Thank you, Mum." Calvin's mother Maggie, who'd joined us again tonight, gave me a long look but said nothing. I could feel her disapproval radiating across the table like heat from a furnace. "How's work been, Calvin?" Mum asked, trying to fill the awkward silence. "Busy. The Morrison account is keeping me up at night." "You work too hard, dear," Mum said sympathetically. "You need to make time for fun, for your family." I nearly choked on my wine. Here was my opening, the perfect opportunity to voice my complaints about Calvin's neglect. "I've been telling him the same thing," I said, pulling out my phone as it buzzed with a notification. "We never go anywhere or do anything exciting anymore." Liam had sent me a photo from the restaurant where we'd had dinner last night, a romantic little Italian place with candlelit tables and excellent wine. The kind of place Calvin would never think to take me. "What's that?" Isabel asked, leaning over to see my screen. "Oh, just a friend sharing photos from this amazing restaurant downtown. Look how romantic it is." I angled the phone so everyone could see, watching Calvin's reaction from the corner of my eye. He glanced at the photo, then back at his plate. No jealousy, no curiosity, nothing. "It does look nice," Mom said. "Maybe you and Calvin should try it sometime." "Maybe," I said, typing a quick response to Liam while still at the table. "If he can tear himself away from work long enough." "Mummy, who are you texting?" Toby asked, his small voice cutting through the adult conversation. "Just a friend, sweetie." "You text friends a lot now," he observed with the brutal honesty of a 7-year-old. "More than you talk to Daddy." The table fell silent. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as everyone stared at me. Even Calvin looked up from his plate, his brown eyes unreadable behind his glasses. "That's not true," I said quickly. "Daddy and I talk all the time." But even as I said it, I realized how hollow it sounded. When was the last time Calvin and I had had a real conversation? When was the last time we talked about anything other than schedules and household logistics? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Liam. This one with a winking emoji that made me smile, despite the tension at the table. "Evadne," Maggie said quietly, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Perhaps you could put that away during family dinner." "It might be important," I replied, not looking up from the screen. "More important than your family," she pressed. Now I did look up, meeting her steely grey eyes with a defiant stare. "It's just a phone, Maggie. People use them. It's not 1950 anymore." "When I was young, families talked to each other at dinner," she said stiffly. "Well, when you were young, families probably had more interesting things to say to each other." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I immediately regretted them. Mom looked shocked, Isabel uncomfortable, and Calvin just looked tired. "Evadne," he said quietly. "That's enough." "Don't tell me what's enough," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "I'm tired of being criticized for everything I do. I'm tired of being treated like a child who needs constant supervision." "No one's treating you like a child," Isabel said gently. "We're just trying to have a nice family dinner." "Are we? Because it feels more like an interrogation." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You know what? I need some air." I walked out onto Mom's back porch, my hands shaking as I lit a cigarette, a habit I'd picked up again recently, much to Calvin's disapproval. The cool evening air felt good against my flushed skin. My phone buzzed again. Liam asking if I was free for a drink later. The thought of spending the evening with someone who actually wanted my company was incredibly tempting. "Can we talk?" I turned to find Calvin standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He looked uncertain, almost nervous, which was unusual for him. "What about?" He stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "About us. About what's happening to us." For a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally going to fight for our marriage, show me that he still cared. "I know I've been distracted lately," he continued. "Work has been overwhelming, and I know I haven't been the best husband or father. But Evadne, what you're doing, this isn't the answer." "What am I doing?" I asked, though my heart was pounding. "The phone, the comments about other men, the way you're pulling away from all of us." "From Toby." His voice was soft, sad. "I know you're unhappy, but we can fix this. We can work on our marriage, go to counseling, whatever you need." I stared at him, this man who thought he could solve everything with logic and reasonable discussions. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Liam did? When was the last time he'd made me feel desired instead of just tolerated? "It's too late for that," I heard myself saying. Something shifted in Calvin's expression. The hope I'd seen there flickered and died. "Is there someone else?" The question hung between us like a loaded gun. I could have said no, could have lied, bought myself more time, maybe even tried to work things out. Instead, I lifted my chin defiantly. Would it matter if there was? Calvin was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, it would matter very much." "Why? You barely notice I exist anymore. When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you surprised me with anything? When was the last time you made me feel like I was more than just your housekeeper and babysitter? Is that really how you feel?" "It's how you make me feel." He nodded slowly, like he was processing information he didn't want to accept. "I see. Do you? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you see me at all anymore." Calvin was quiet again, staring out at Mum's garden in the fading daylight. When he looked at me again, there was something different in his eyes, something I couldn't quite identify. "You're right," he said finally. I haven't been seeing you clearly, but I'm seeing you now. Something in his tone made me shiver, but before I could ask what he meant, the porch door opened and Isabel appeared. Everything okay out here? Mum's worried. We're fine, I said quickly, stubbing out my cigarette. Just getting some air. But as we went back inside to finish dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between Calvin and me. The way he looked at me now was different. Not angry, not hurt, but calculating. Like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. And I wasn't sure I liked what he was seeing. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by Mum's attempts at cheerful conversation and Toby's innocent chatter. Calvin barely spoke, but I could feel him watching me every time I checked my phone. When we finally got home that night, he went straight to his office and closed the door. I could hear him on the phone, his voice too low to make out the words. I texted Liam back, accepting his invitation for drinks. I needed to get out of this house, away from Calvin's strange new intensity and Maggie's disapproving stares. I needed to be somewhere I felt wanted. As I got ready to leave, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked good, attractive, confident, alive. This was who I really was, not the tired housewife Calvin had stopped noticing. I was just reaching for my car keys when Calvin's office door opened. Going somewhere? He asked. Out with friends. Don't wait up. He nodded, but there was something in his expression that made my stomach flutter with unease. Drive carefully, he said. These days, you never know who might be watching. The law office of Peterson and Associates occupied the third floor of a glass building downtown, its waiting room decorated in soothing blues and greys. Calvin sat in a leather chair, his hands folded in his lap as he waited for his appointment. He'd been planning this meeting for weeks, ever since he'd started noticing the signs. The late nights Evadne claimed to be working. The new clothes, the extra attention to her appearance, the way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets, and most telling of all, the dashcam footage from her car that showed her parked outside an apartment complex he'd never heard her mention. Mr. Marrow, Miss Peterson will see you now. Calvin followed the receptionist into a corner office, where a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s sat behind a mahogany desk. Sarah Peterson had been recommended by a colleague as someone who handled divorce cases with discretion and efficiency. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Calvin said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Of course, you mentioned on the phone that you suspect your wife is having an affair. Calvin opened the folder he'd brought and spread its contents across her desk. Phone records showing excessive texting to an unknown number, credit card statements revealing charges at restaurants he'd never been to, photos from the dash cam showing Evadne's car in compromising locations. I've been documenting everything for the past month, he said quietly. I know how this looks, like I'm some obsessive husband spying on his wife, but I have a 7-year-old son to think about. Ms. Peterson studied the evidence with professional detachment. This is quite thorough. Have you confronted your wife about any of this? Not directly. I've tried to talk to her about our marriage, but she's not the woman I married anymore. She's become someone I don't recognize. That's common in these situations. People often change when they're living a double life. She leaned back in her chair. What are you hoping to accomplish here, Mr. Marrow? I want to protect my son, and I want to make sure that when this all comes out, and it will come out, I'm not the one who gets blindsided. Meanwhile, across town, Evadne was having lunch with her sister at their favorite cafe. She'd been careful to choose a different place than where she met Liam, though she wasn't entirely sure why. You seem different lately, Isabel observed, picking at her salad. Happier, but also, I don't know, restless. I feel like I'm finally waking up after years of sleepwalking, Evadne replied, checking her phone as it buzzed with another message from Liam. I forgot what it felt like to have someone actually interested in what I have to say. Someone. Evadne looked up to find her sister watching her with concern. I mean people in general, friends, co-workers. Evadne, you wouldn't do anything to hurt Calvin, would you? Or Toby? The question stung because it hit too close to home. Why would you ask that? Because you're my sister, and I love you, but you're acting like someone I don't recognize. The phone, the secretiveness, the way you talk about Calvin like he's some kind of burden. He is a burden, Evadne snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. It's just, when did my life become so small? When did I become the kind of person who gets excited about grocery shopping and laundry? You became a mother, a wife. That's not small, Evadne. That's everything. But Evadne was barely listening. Liam had sent her a photo of himself at his office, looking handsome and successful in his expensive suit. The kind of man who took women to nice restaurants and bought them thoughtful gifts. I have to go, she said abruptly, gathering her purse. Work emergency. She left Isabel sitting at the table looking worried and confused. That afternoon, Evadne met Liam at a wine bar downtown. It was becoming their regular spot, intimate, dimly lit, the kind of place where married women could meet their lovers without being recognized. You look stressed, Liam observed, signaling the waitress for another bottle of wine. Just family drama. My sister thinks she knows what's best for everyone. Families can be complicated. That's why I keep mine at arm's length. He reached across the table and took her hand. But let's not talk about that. I have news. Good news, I hope. The best. My company is sending me to the conference in Miami next month. 3 days at the Fontainebleau. All expenses paid. He squeezed her hand. Come with me. Evadne's heart skipped. Liam, I can't. I have responsibilities, a family. You have a life. Your life. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? She couldn't remember. Every decision she'd made for the past 8 years had been filtered through what was best for Calvin, for Toby, for everyone except herself. Think about it, Liam continued. 3 days of just us. Room service, spa treatments, that little bikini you mentioned buying but never wearing. The fantasy was intoxicating. She could picture herself on the beach, free from the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning and mediating between Calvin's work stress and Toby's needs. I'll think about it, she heard herself saying, but even as she said it, she knew she was going to say yes. That evening, Calvin was unusually quiet during dinner. He helped Toby with his homework, read him a bedtime story, and went through all the motions of normal family life. But Evadne could feel him watching her, studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. I need to run some errands tomorrow, she announced as they cleaned up the kitchen. Might be gone most of the afternoon. What kind of errands? The question was casual, but something in his tone made her defensive. Just things. Shopping. Maybe lunch with Isabel. Calvin nodded and continued loading the dishwasher. But later that night, as Evadne lay in bed pretending to sleep, she heard him moving around downstairs. The soft click of his office door closing. The murmur of his voice on the phone. Who was he talking to at 11 o'clock at night? The next morning, Calvin left for work earlier than usual, kissing her forehead in a gesture that felt more like a goodbye than a see you later. Evadne spent the day in a haze of anticipation and guilt. She met Liam for lunch, where he showed her photos of the Miami hotel and talked about all the things they could do together. She found herself saying yes before she'd fully thought it through. Really? His face lit up with excitement. You'll come with me? Yes, she said, and felt something inside her break free. Yes, I want to go. That afternoon, she went shopping for the trip, buying clothes she'd never wear in her regular life. A red dress that hugged her curves. Lingerie that made her feel sexy and desirable. A new perfume that smelled nothing like the vanilla scent Calvin had given her for Christmas. She was walking to her car, arms full of shopping bags, when she spotted a familiar figure across the street. Maggie, Calvin's mother, standing outside the law office building with a grim expression on her face. Their eyes met across the busy street, and Evadne felt her blood turn to ice. Maggie didn't wave or smile. She just stood there, watching, like a sentinel guarding secrets Evadne didn't want exposed. That night at dinner, Calvin seemed almost cheerful. He asked about her day, complimented the meal she'd prepared, even suggested they watch a movie together after Toby went to bed. "That sounds nice," Evadne said, though her mind was racing. Had Maggie told him something? Did he know about her shopping trip, about Miami, about Liam? But Calvin's behavior gave nothing away. He was attentive, affectionate even, like the husband she remembered from their early years together. It wasn't until she was getting ready for bed that she noticed her phone had been moved. Just slightly, from where she'd left it on her nightstand, but enough to make her paranoid. Had Calvin been going through her messages? Did he know about Liam? She checked her phone anxiously, but all her conversations with Liam were still there, undeleted. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the stress of living a double life was making her paranoid. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to Calvin's steady breathing beside her, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, and she was right. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Evadne was getting ready for another lunch date with Liam. Calvin's voice on the phone was unusually warm, almost cheerful. "Hey, I was thinking we should have everyone over for dinner this weekend. Your mom, Isabel, my mother. Make it a real family gathering." Evadne paused in applying her lipstick. "That's sudden. What's the occasion?" "Do we need an occasion to spend time with family? I feel like we've all been drifting apart lately. This could be good for us." There was something in his tone that made her uneasy, but she couldn't put her finger on what. "Okay, sure. Saturday night." "Perfect. I'll handle all the arrangements. You just focus on whatever it is you're doing these days." After he hung up, Evadne stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked good, better than she had in years. The affair had given her a glow, a confidence that showed in the way she carried herself. But Calvin's sudden interest in family dinners felt wrong somehow. In 8 years of marriage, he'd never once suggested hosting both their mothers at the same time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Can't wait to see you. Have I mentioned how amazing you look in that blue dress?" She smiled despite her unease. In 2 days, she'd be on a plane to Miami with him. 3 days of freedom, of being treated like a desirable woman instead of a tired housewife. She just had to get through this family dinner first. Meanwhile, across town, Isabel was having her own doubts about her sister's recent behavior. The secretive phone calls, the new clothes, the way Evadne's eyes lit up whenever she got a text message. It all pointed to something Isabel didn't want to acknowledge. So when Calvin called and asked if she could stop by after work to check on things, she agreed immediately. She found him in his home office, surrounded by papers and looking more serious than she'd ever seen him. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing for her to sit down. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Has Evadne said anything to you about being unhappy in our marriage?" Isabel shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Calvin, I don't think I should—" "Please, I'm not asking you to betray her confidence. I'm asking because I'm trying to understand what's happening to my family." The pain in his voice was unmistakable. Isabel had always liked Calvin. He was steady, reliable, a good father and husband. If Evadne was throwing that away for some excitement— "She's mentioned feeling neglected," Isabel said carefully. "Like you two have grown apart." Calvin nodded slowly. "And has she mentioned anyone else? Any new friends? Maybe someone from work?" The question hung in the air between them. Isabel thought about all the times recently that Evadne had claimed to be working late, meeting colleagues, dealing with work emergencies. "I don't know," she said finally. "But Calvin, if you're worried about something specific—" "I am. And after Saturday night, everyone will know exactly what I'm worried about." There was something in his tone that made Isabel's stomach clench with dread. Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. Evadne had spent the afternoon preparing Calvin's favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being fattened for slaughter. The family gathered around their dining room table, Helen and Maggie sitting across from each other with barely concealed mutual dislike, Isabel looking nervous for reasons Evadne couldn't understand, and Toby chattering excitedly about his upcoming school play. Calvin was the perfect host, making sure everyone's wine glass stayed full and steering the conversation toward safe topics. But Yvonne could feel his attention on her, like a weight, watching every time she checked her phone or shifted in her seat. "This roast is delicious, dear," her mother said. "You've always been such a good cook." "Thank you, Mom. It's important for a wife to take care of her family," Maggie added pointedly, "to put their needs first." Evadne felt her jaw clench. "Of course, though sometimes wives have needs too." "Such as?" Maggie's grey eyes were sharp with challenge. "Such as feeling appreciated, feeling like they're more than just cooks and housekeepers." "Now, ladies," Calvin interjected smoothly, "let's not turn dinner into a debate." But something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Toby seemed to sense it, growing quieter as the adults' conversation became more strained. "Mummy, are you going on another work trip?" he asked suddenly. Evadne nearly choked on her wine. "What makes you ask that, sweetie?" "I saw your suitcase in the closet, the pretty one you bought for our vacation last year." Every eye at the table turned to her. Evadne felt heat rise in her cheeks as she scrambled for an explanation. "I might have to travel for work," she said carefully. "Nothing's definite yet." "Where to?" Isabel asked. "Just a conference, very boring business stuff." Calvin was watching her with that same calculating expression she'd noticed more and more lately. "What kind of conference?" "Administrative procedures. Really, it's nothing interesting." But even as she said it, she could see the doubt in everyone's faces. Her mother looked confused. Evadne had never traveled for work before. Isabel looked suspicious, and Maggie looked like she was putting together pieces of a puzzle. "Well," Calvin said, setting down his wine glass with deliberate care, "since we're all here together, I have something I'd like to share with everyone." The room fell silent. Even Toby stopped fidgeting and looked at his father with wide eyes. Calvin stood up and walked to the sideboard, where he'd placed a manila folder earlier. Evadne's heart began to pound as he returned to the table. "I've been doing some thinking lately about trust," he said conversationally, "about honesty, about what it means to be a family." "Calvin," Evadne said quietly, warning in her voice. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was addressing the table like he was giving a presentation. "I've learned some interesting things recently, about credit card charges at restaurants I've never been to, about phone calls to numbers I don't recognize, about trips that aren't really work conferences." Evadne's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Calvin opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Because I have photographs, Evadne. I have phone records. I have receipts." He spread them across the table like playing cards. Photos of her car parked outside Liam's apartment, screenshots of text messages, credit card statements, highlighting charges at romantic restaurants. The room erupted in shocked silence. Helen gasped. Isabel covered her mouth with her hand. Maggie just nodded grimly, like she'd been expecting this moment. "You've been spying on me?" Evadne's voice was shrill with panic and outrage. "I've been protecting my family," Calvin replied calmly, "which is more than I can say for you. This is insane. You can't just—" "I can, and I did. Because while you've been playing games and living your double life, I've been consulting with lawyers. I've been documenting everything. I've been preparing for this moment." He pulled out another set of papers, official-looking documents with legal letterhead. "Divorce papers," he said simply. "Already filed. Custody arrangements already proposed. I'm not asking for alimony, and I'm not trying to take Toby away from you. but I'm done pretending this marriage exists. Evadne stared at the papers in shock. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "Calvin, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Like you worked it out with Liam Drexel?" The name hit the table like a bomb. Evadne felt the blood drain from her face as she realized the extent of what Calvin knew. "Who's Liam Drexel?" Helen asked weakly. Calvin pulled out one more photograph, a clear shot of Evadne and Liam kissing outside the wine bar downtown. "He's the marketing manager my wife has been having an affair with for the past 2 months. The man she was planning to go to Miami with next week." The silence that followed was deafening. Toby looked confused and scared. Helen looked like she might faint. Isabel looked at her sister with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. And then, in the midst of all that judgment and shock, Isabel did something that surprised everyone. She reached over and placed her hand gently on Calvin's arm. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "You didn't deserve this." It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that moment, Evadne realized she hadn't just lost her husband. She'd lost her family.